After you've completed this module, you will be able to identify what constitutes an unauthorized commitment, list the steps involved in ratifying an unauthorized commitment, recognize best practices to avoid making an unauthorized commitment. Could you pay $500, $5,000, $50,000, or even $500,000 of your own money for an unauthorized commitment? Even if you could, would you want to? It could happen to any government employee. If you answered no to any of these questions, this is the training for you. Providing for the needs of our veterans requires the procurement of a vast array of goods and services, including medical equipment, facilities, professional services, office supplies, and more. Unfortunately, Veterans Affairs also exhausts time and budget dollars addressing unauthorized commitments when these purchases are not made according to established procedures. What is an unauthorized commitment? An unauthorized commitment is many times referred to as a UAC. Let's start with what a UAC is. It is an act by an employee who obligates the government to pay for goods or services without the proper authority. It's an agreement that is not binding on the government solely because the government representative who made it lacks the authority to enter into that agreement. What does this mean? It means that unless you've been delegated the authority in the form of a contracting officer's warrant or a purchase card holder acting within the limits of their delegated authority, you cannot legally obligate for goods or services. If you order or accept goods or services from a vendor without a valid contract, this is a UAC. And if you are the one who ordered or accepted the items, you are the committer and could ultimately be liable for the cost of what you ordered or accepted. If you are facing a decision to bypass the procurement process, contact your contracting officer. The contracting officer may be able to provide a solution that does not result in a UAC. Can a UAC be corrected? Yes, in some cases using the ratification process. Be aware that only certain actions can be ratified. Those that cannot be ratified become the personal liability of the individual committing the act. Ratifying an unauthorized commitment is both time-consuming and costly. These individuals could be affected: the contracting officer representative or CORE, the purchasing agent, purchase card holder, or procurement specialist, the contracting officer, the purchaser, program officer or requester, and the ratification official. Consequences of unauthorized commitments to the individual involved include revocation of purchase card or warrant, documentation in permanent employee record, or termination of employment. Consequences of unauthorized commitments to the government include damage to the government's reputation, damage to the government's ability to conduct future business with the companies involved, and higher prices for goods and services with the vendor due to delayed payment. Who's responsible for avoiding unauthorized commitments? Anyone who is in contact with or has cognizance of the contract. What are some common causes of UACs? Unauthorized commitments don't always result from an intentional act, but there are many causes that can result in an unauthorized commitment. Click on each image to reveal some of the common causes. The purchaser is unaware that the valid contract has expired. The CORE, under delegation of the contracting officer, approves work that is beyond the scope of the contract. The purchaser is in a hurry and doesn't process the requisition for the goods or services. The purchaser is focused on supporting the mission and/or pleasing the boss. The purchaser is operating under the begging forgiveness model and feels it is better to not get prior approval rather than be denied permission. The purchase cardholder splits an order to make a purchase that, when totaled, exceeds the delegated level of authority. When an unauthorized commitment does occur, it is sometimes possible for the agency to ratify the commitment. Ratification is the process of approving an unauthorized commitment by an official who has the authority to do so. Ratifying an unauthorized commitment is both time-consuming and costly. To understand why, let's take a look at the ratification process. Whenever an unauthorized commitment has been identified, the senior contracting officer should advise the person furnishing the unauthorized supplies or services that they are being provided at the person's own risk and advise the person to stop. If the payment was made by purchase card, the contracting officer with the purchase card coordinator must take action to stop or recover the payment. The individual who made the unauthorized commitment will be notified of the seriousness of the act and possible consequences and require compliance with VAR 801.6. VAR 801.6 describes the responsibilities of the contracting officers during the ratification process, as well as the requirements for submitting a request for ratification. If payment was made with a purchase card, the contracting officer shall evaluate the request and prepare a memorandum to the approving ratification official. The ratification official then determines whether or not to ratify according to the limitations cited in FAR 1.6. The individual who committed the unauthorized commitment or the employee's supervisor prepares a request for a ratification memo and furnishes all related information to the contracting officer as required by VAR 801.6. The contracting officer shall evaluate the request and prepare a memorandum to the approving ratification official. The ratification official then determines whether or not to ratify according to the limitations cited in FAR 1.6. FAR 1.6 describes the policies and limitations for the approval of ratifications. The ratification official shall review the material and either approve or disapprove the request and return the package to the contracting officer. If approved, the contracting officer assigns a PO or a contract number to the approved request and must clearly indicate that this is a ratification of an unauthorized commitment. If denied, the contracting officer will send a letter to the vendor and the individual explaining the decision not to ratify. In addition, if the ratification is denied, the individual may receive a bill for all purchase costs that cannot be stopped or recovered. All unauthorized commitments are a violation of the law. VA employees who make unauthorized commitments may also be subject to legal consequences, which can be severe and may include personal liability for the amount of the purchase, which means that you will be required to pay for the entire cost of the purchase, revocation of purchase card authority, suspension without pay or termination of employment. A letter of counseling may be attached to your permanent record, And if you are a contracting officer, your warrant can be removed permanently. In addition, it can also lead to damaging the government's ability to conduct future business with the businesses involved and result in higher prices, since the business could be waiting months to get paid for goods and services already provided. Remember, the ratification process is both costly and time-consuming. Who has legal authority to make a commitment? Making a legal commitment on behalf of the government involves everyone and requires that everyone knows their responsibilities in order to avoid making an unauthorized commitment. Only a warranted contracting officer or purchasing agent can legally make commitments to contractors, companies, or individuals, or sign or verbally issue requests for them to perform work. Nobody else in the government can legally make commitments, so always ensure that the vendor knows you are not authorized to place orders. Only a warranted contracting officer or purchasing agent can lawfully obligate the government. A warrant is a government-issued certificate of appointment that authorizes the owner to obligate the government. Unless you've completed the necessary education and training required to qualify for a warrant, have received official approval for a warrant, and possess a valid SF 1402 certificate with your name on it, you cannot make purchases for any amount. How do you avoid making an unauthorized commitment? It is everyone's responsibility to avoid making an unauthorized commitment. Click on the images for tips that will help you to avoid making an unauthorized commitment. Be careful that your words and/or actions are not misinterpreted as the placement of an order. Do not place any orders or make any commitments to contractors, companies, or individuals, or sign or verbally issue requests for them to perform work unless you are a warranted contracting officer or purchasing agent. If you were the contracting officer or purchasing agent and being pressured to sign a contract or purchase order or to make a credit card purchase that you know is not legal or proper, just say no. You are the person who will be held accountable, not the person who pressured you. You may be limited by what you may purchase and the dollar value of the purchase. Exceeding these limits will result in an unauthorized commitment, including use of a government purchase card. Never split the cost of a purchase to stay within the purchase card dollar limits. Do not issue funds to any supplier or contractor without an authorized contract, regardless of dollar amount. If you are working with a vendor that offers to send you the products, wants to agree on a delivery date, discusses payment terms, or wants to negotiate a price, stop the discussion. Tell the vendor that you are not authorized to place orders or to discuss contract terms. Remember, if you are facing a decision to bypass the procurement process, contact your contracting officer. The contracting officer may be able to provide a solution that does not result in a UAC. Everyone at the VA has a role in supporting the needs of our veterans. Just remember that if you are not a warranted contracting officer or purchasing agent, do not make any commitments on behalf of the government. It's not your It's not your role. By working together and always following established procedures, you can avoid making an unauthorized commitment.
Okay, here's the 2237 for the accreditation service.
Wow, you got that done pretty fast.
It's the same vendor and service we had last year, so I just copied all the information from last year's request.
Thanks, Yvonne. I'll let you know how things progress. The vendor sent the invoice for the accreditation. I'll send it over to you.
Thanks. No issues?
There shouldn't be, but as the core, you have to review and submit for payment first. Remember, payment terms of the contract are net 30 days, and I need about a week after you return it to me to process and submit payment.
Okay, then it shouldn't be a problem getting this reviewed for you.
Did you get the invoice we sent?
Yes, but I was surprised to see that it's higher than expected. It's $7,500 more than last year, which is the amount I got approved.
Yes, we had a price increase, as we indicated on all our statements, including the original invoice. Is there a problem? Did we get that regulatory service yet?
No, and it needs to be performed by early next week.
Well, the contractor we have used in the past can provide next day service as long as I can get the order in before 4 p.m.
True, but we'll never get a purchase order processed in the next 45 minutes. So what should we do?
We are short on time, so I think we should schedule the service while we still can. If we don't, the service will never get performed on time, and this is technically a critical safety issue as well. Then we can submit the paperwork before leaving today.
It makes sense to me. The service will be done on time, the paperwork will be in, and the vendor will get paid. Everybody's happy.
I'm glad this repair is finally getting done. We need our forklifts for a big job next week, so my supervisor will be pleased to know they are all working.
Well, this one will be working, but I see you have a flat tire on your other forklift too.
Wow, I didn't realize it. It took over a week to get this repair authorized and scheduled. My supervisor will not be happy.
Well, I can fix it since I'm here. Just add it to the cost of the invoice. By the way, if you really want to save your department on repair costs, we have a great service plan. It offers same-day service and discount on the repair bill. If you purchase it today, I can even apply the savings to today's repair bill.
I see you have a portable air pump. Just this morning, my supervisor and I were discussing the fact that we need one pretty badly. The one you have would certainly do the trick.
Actually, we sell these. Usually we can place an order and get it to you in just a couple of weeks. Is that soon enough?
I guess it will have to be. I can't get you a requisition for that today.
I also accept credit cards, if that works.